The Consulting Success podcast is powered by the Clarity Coaching Program. If you'd like to work directly with the Consulting Success team and receive personal coaching and support to optimize and grow your consulting business, marketing, and revenue, visit consultingsuccess.com to find out more and apply.
Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky, and I'm here today with Andrew Sobel. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's great to be here.
Andrew, as I mentioned to you, very excited. I've been a fan of your work for a long time. You are the leading authority on driving consistent revenue growth through client loyalty and business relationships. For over 35 years, you've worked with firms like Bain & Company, PwC, Deloitte, many more that we don't have time to name here. We'd be here for hours, but they've really relied on your expertise. You've written multiple best-selling books that have sold, from what I counted here, over 250,000 copies. Over 40,000 professionals have gone through your training and learning programs. People often consider consulting a relationship business. Some call it a marketing business. In your experience, what really rings true to you when you think about consulting and being a consultant?
Sure. So I think there's different things take on different levels of importance as you go through your career, of course. So if you think about it very early in your consulting career, especially if you're working for a firm where perhaps the marketing and brand is done by maybe the partners or the brand is embodied in the firm itself, developing your expertise obviously is critical. I think that's true also of a new consultant or someone who has set up their own practice, who came from industry. You have to be known for something. We all can't be a Peter Drucker who sort of is thought of as a management guru. And of course, Peter Drucker did a lot of individual jobs before he became a management guru and demonstrated his expertise. So early on, that's critical. But what I find is that then gets in the way, actually, of a very successful consulting career and having great client relationships. And we can go into that in a little more detail, because that mindset shift.
I'd love to just kind of get to that right now. What do you mean by that? That here someone's developing expertise, but you're mentioning that can maybe get in the way a little bit of their growth.
Absolutely. So what happens is we develop, and I'm guilty of it as as anyone else, as guilty as anyone else. Our culture loves experts. Clients love experts. They want someone who has great expertise in a particular problem they're solving. But what happens is we develop what I call the expert mindset. So the expert mindset is, I'm here to give you the answers. It's all about my solutions, my methodology, my expertise. We tend to present at clients. We want to convince them of our credibility. We sell as opposed to create, so that I'll sort of distinguish the two. What we're trying to get to is deep expertise, but with the advisor mindset. And I also call that person, in my very first book, Clients for Life, we wrote about the deep generalist. So it's somebody who has a very deep expertise, which is your ticket to entry. It gets you chosen, but they've layered breadth on top of that. And that breadth includes strategic thinking skills, big picture skills, but it also includes relational skills. It includes business acumen, not just methodology.
Can you maybe just distinguish and differentiate for us? So you're mentioning on one side, there's the expert mindset, and then on the other side, there's the advisor mindset. How do they differ? Maybe just offer an example or two of each.
Yeah. So I had a client once who was presenting, and this big slide deck, it was really interesting. And after about 20 slides, he stopped in front of this big room, and everybody was really interested in the next section. And he said, I'm going to skip the next 20 slides. That's not in my bailiwick. That's somebody else's expertise. And everybody was like, no, we want to talk about this. And he said, no, that's not my expertise. And he took the 20 slides and ripped them off and then went into the next section. Yeah, that's an example of an expert behavior. Another good example is consultants who say, I want to go visit this client, or I want to go talk to a prospect, but I need a really good idea. I need a kind of killer idea to go have a conversation. Honestly, a lot of my clients in big firms, Michael, they also want to have a PowerPoint deck. It's a little less of a problem with independent consultants because you have to be more entrepreneurial. You can't spend all your time building 50-page decks. But in big firms, I'll tell you, which is a lot of my client base, build these big decks. And so it's like, I need a PowerPoint deck to go talk to a client. But the fact is, and what ends up happening is you set this incredibly high hurdle to just go talk to a client. And the fact is, great relationships are based on great conversations, not one person showing the other how smart they are. That's not how it works. So those are some examples of how that expert behavior trips us up. So I like to say experts tell, advisors ask great questions and listen. Experts sell, advisors create a buyer who's enthusiastic about what you have to offer, right? Experts build professional credibility, not bad. Advisors build deep personal trust so that we go from Michael saying, Andrew, I trust the information you're giving me to Andrew, I not only trust your information, but I trust your integrity. I know you will always come through for me. You'll let me know about problems as soon as they arise. You won't try to hide them. You're going to deliver what you say. You know what I mean? So that's a whole different level of trust in my personal integrity. Another good difference or important difference is as experts, we like to analyze. And when you analyze, you tear a problem down into pieces, in a sense. Advisors are very good at synthesis. It's putting the pieces back together, seeing the patterns, and so on. And that's really treasured by clients. They can hire lots of experts who are kind of commodities, who can do analysis. But to find the advisor, like you, for example, who can perhaps bring more big picture thinking to the table, that's really treasured by them because a lot of it's just not that common skill. So those are some of the differences.
And I appreciate sharing those. Would you say in your experience and kind of looking back at your own career and the careers of other successful consultants or people in professional services, is it a progression? Do people typically begin their journey as experts working in an organization? Like, is that their ticket to the front door if their brand is not yet established? And then once they're in the door, they have the opportunity to shift from being the expert to now becoming the advisor? Or is it possible for someone to just reach advisor status without doing the expert level work and start working with clients right away at that level?
So I'm not going to give you a yes or no answer. I think that it's hard to operate at that advisor level, that trusted advisor level, if the client doesn't have strong belief in your competence, your ability to deliver. So I do think on the one hand, there is a bit of a progression, which is you have to establish that you really know your stuff. When I meet with a client for the first time, honestly, despite pretty significant experience, at this point, nearly 40 years experience, including not just as a consultant, but as a senior executive in a big consulting firm, a C-suite executive in a big consulting firm, I still, though, have to impress the client that I really understand their problem and I have solutions that will fix that problem. Okay, now let me go back on what I just said. I think even in that very first meeting, though, as you demonstrate your expertise, you also can be demonstrating your advisory chops, your business acumen, your big picture thinking. So, for example, I might ask my clients some pretty interesting questions about their challenge that demonstrate my expertise. And we can get to those later. I call them credibility building questions. At the same time, I'm going to be sort of stepping back and exploring the big picture with them. I'm going to be potentially challenging them, which is something an advisor does, right? You challenge. You don't just accept the problem definition. I also might be sort of perhaps delving into the personal aspects of the problem and asking some more personal and emotional questions. So I think that you can actually do them simultaneously when you're getting to know a client. It doesn't have to be a rigid linear progression. But I don't think millennials are that different than I was as a baby boomer. Most young people are in a hurry. They think they know everything, And so I think you do have to be careful about showing up on the job or showing up at an employer and trying to put this impression forth that you already know everything, because people are going to see right through that.
Let's talk about that. I mean, you actually hit on my next question here, which is, and I know you talk about in your new book, how to really leverage that first meeting with a client to make the right impression. You have a whole bunch of questions that people can use, not only in this new book, but in your other book, Power Questions, and others as well, that are great. You may just talk through a little bit here for people listening or watching right now. What are a few questions or a few ideas or frameworks that they should be thinking about when they go to that meeting and really want to make a great first impression?
Sure. So just very quickly, the big picture here is you have to get through 4 or 5 key objectives I think in any first meeting. You need to build rapport and set up the meeting. And so we can dig into that a little bit. Then the next step is you need to establish your credibility if they don't know you very well. and good ways of doing that and bad ways of doing it. Third, you have to try to understand their agenda, which is the agenda for me is what are their critical priorities, right? Any good consultant with their soul knows they need to do that, but often they don't go about it in the right way. And they ask questions like, hey, what keeps you up at night? What does success look like? And just a lot of cliche questions that aren't that effective. Here's the rub. You're trying to find a mutual issue of interest that you can go deep on. And that's the thing. Is there an urgent issue here, something the client is really struggling a bit with that you have expertise and some solutions in? I'm trying to find that red issue. I don't want the pink issue or the minor issue. I'm really trying to find what is it that we could really have a great conversation about. And then you go deep and you add value in the conversation.
So what would be maybe one example of that type of question that you would put to someone that demonstrates your expertise, that you've done some homework, but also is not just answering a question that maybe you already know the answer to, like, you're trying to identify that value. So what might you ask in that situation?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. And there's a couple of techniques for this. One technique is, I call it simply the credibility building question. It's very simple, but it takes a little thought to formulate these and to have them in your back pocket. It's two parts. One is an observation. Part two is a question. So in my world, if I were meeting with a client, let's just say they were struggling to move their client-facing executives from being subject matter experts to being C-suite advisors. That might be something. And I might say something like this. In the research I've done, and in my experience in working with similar clients on this issue, there are three significant barriers to making that shift from subject matter expert to C-suite advisor. And this limiting expert mindset that people get them into. Number two, it's measurement and reward systems, because you're not rewarding people for the C-suite behaviors. You're now rewarding them for expert behaviors. And third, organizational silos, which make it hard for any one individual to be adequately representing the totality of solutions you bring. Those aren't necessarily always the same three, but let's just say those are three. I would then flip it. I'd say, Michael, I'm curious though, in your organization, what are you finding is holding you back? What are some of the barriers you find? And so in literally 30 seconds or 60 seconds, I've shown, man, I really understand this, but I don't want to talk a lot about me. I want to talk about you. So I flip it. And so I find that's a really good way of establishing your expertise. So another variant of that question is the implication question. So I might say, it's interesting. I've noticed in the consulting industry that there is divergence, or the market seems to be splitting between very large firms that dominate big swaths of corporate America and a lot of very small boutiques and individual practitioners. But a lot of the mid-sized firms, I think, are getting squeezed out. Here's an example of that. Or I'm not sure that's totally true, but it might be a little bit true. And then I would say, as a mid-sized firm yourself, how are you experiencing these competitive dynamics? What pressure are you feeling from below and above as so that's like
And Andrew, a quick question for you on this. So have you already asked at this stage other questions? So if we take your first example about the moving from experts to C-suite advisor, how would you know that that's an issue or even something that the person cares about? Would that have come up in conversation beforehand or even before you set the meeting, or?
Yeah, usually they might have said to me on the phone or in an email. Now, if I go in cold, and this does happen to me, people email me and say, hey, Andrew, we read your book here at my company. We'd love to talk to you. Often I end up on the phone or face to face with them. And maybe I haven't done as much homework as I should have in terms of saying, exactly what do you want to talk about on your call? Or sometimes they're very general. And they say, we would just like to get to know you and explore what you might have to offer our company. One of the first questions I ask is, I'll sit down and say, Mary, it was great to meet you today. From your perspective, what would be the most valuable use of the time we have together today? And you'd be surprised how quickly that galvanizes their focus on what they really want to talk about, as opposed to me assuming they want to hear all about Andrew Sobel and my books and blah, blah, blah. Another version of that is, and I might use this with a current client, I might sit down with them and say, Michael, great, glad we could get together today. I know we have our agenda that we discussed, but tell me, what's the single most important issue you want to make sure we discuss today? What's the single most important issue you want to make sure we really cover today? I'm always getting people to refocus or to focus on what they want. And the result is, instead of dancing around a lot of stuff, you get them focused. on an issue, and here's the key thing, that is emotionally energizing to them. It's something they're really excited about or they're very fearful about when I do that. So that's something I sometimes will start out with in a meeting to get them focused. But other ways of getting at that agenda. So you can go direct. So you do your research, obviously, and if you know somebody in the organization, you can, a coach, they can coach you on what they think is important. So that's one thing. Then there's the direct questions, which I don't like that much. And the direct questions are, what are the top 3 issues you're grappling with this year? What are your 3 biggest priorities for fiscal 20? And so on. The reason I don't love the direct ones is that the more senior the executive, the less likely that they're really going to tell you what's on their mind. Might kind of give you the party line. Some clients just, if they don't know you and trust you, they're not going to open up.
Right. It also appears that the consultant in that situation hasn't really taken the time to do some homework. They haven't shown that they understand or have tried to understand the situation that person or the organization might be in. Is that also a factor?
Absolutely. Good. That's a great point, Michael. It doesn't show much preparation to just say, what are your top issues? Because and I've interviewed thousands of top executives on this topic, and what they tell me is, look, this is literally the message. You have to walk a fine line between preparing, knowing the broad lines of our strategy, outlines of our strategy, but also you can't walk in here assuming that you really know what's important to me, right? And so you've got to be, if you walk in and just say, hey, in fact, a real story here. One of my clients, CEO of a technology company, told me that one of the big consulting firms called him up, very prestigious firm. One of the partners there said, hey, we'd like to come by and see you. And so the guy came with 2 other consultants and sat down on the couch in his office. And he said they started the meeting by saying, so tell us about your business. Tell us about your strategy. And he told me, I stood up from behind my desk. I walked over and I looked at them and said, no, I'm not going to talk about that. You tell me why you're here. What's our agenda? Add some value to the conversation. And then maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my strategy. So I think you're right. You can't just, in fact, it's a joke. Clients say to me, yeah, the consultants come in, they ask me what my 3 top issues are, and then they say, we can help you with number 2.
Right. It's interesting because, you used the word obviously a few moments ago when you talked about, obviously doing your homework. And I think, to you, it's obvious. To me, I believe it's obvious to others, hopefully as well. But in the day and age that we're in right now, so many people seem to be focusing less on relationships and more on transactions. They're trying to automate all aspects of their outreach. They're focusing more on volume, not on value. I'm interested in your experience here from a marketing perspective. Let's say that you have your brand. It's not the Andrew Sobel brand of today, but let's go back 20 years in time or so. And you want to reach a decision maker, an executive at a well-established company, and they may have heard of your work. Maybe they haven't even ever heard of you. How do you get in front of them? Because a lot of the questions where you can demonstrate your value and actually deliver value come when you're in front of the client. Many consultants struggle with how to actually get in front of that prospective client. What have you found works best to actually have an opportunity to speak and to meet with an ideal client if you don't actually know for certain what their big issues are? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio. AUDIO.
Sure. That's the $1,000,000 question. The honest answer to that is that it requires a multi-pronged strategy and a lot of hard work, in truth.
Hey, it's Michael here, and we'll be right back to the podcast. But first, are you ready to grow, scale, and take your consulting business and marketing to the next level? If so, our Clarity Coaching Program may be a great fit for you. You'll work with our experienced team to set up a strategic plan for your business and coach you step by step in areas like how to consistently attract more leads, develop a magnetic message that resonates with your ideal clients, strategically package and position your services, earn higher fees, win more proposals, and scale your business. To find out more about Clarity Coaching and apply, go to consultingsuccess.com and click on coaching.
Tell us about your strategy, or what did you do?
So I have a theory that there's 4 or 5 different, and this is not in my new book, but this is something a theory I've always had. I won't go into all the details, but I believe there's about 5 models for driving your marketing strategy as a consultant. And often we use several of them. It's not like there's just one model.
Right. It's like a hybrid of at times. Sure.
Number 1 strategy is a content-led strategy. It's a content marketing strategy. So I will tell you, when I first left Gemini Consulting, where I had been for 15 years, and I'd been a senior partner and had run a country operation for them, the first couple of years, it was a relational strategy. So I basically knew or got introduced to, through people I knew, to several CEOs. One of them was Cox Communications. Another one was a big tech firm in the West Coast. Another one was one in Dallas. And for 2 or 3 years, I had a great practice, literally with just a couple clients, very top level work. That was a relational strategy. Then I said, I don't think this is sustainable for a long-term career as building a small practice. And I developed a content-led strategy. So I started writing books, and I was fortunate. I started writing the first book in 1999. It came out in 2000, and it was the right time and the right place, and it was called Clients for Life. And there weren't a bunch of books on the topic at the time. In fact, nobody had written a book about advisory relationships. And Meister, a few months after that, published The Trusted Advisor, and that kind of started the wave. That book, I'll be honest, was transformational because it very, very well. It was, on some bestseller lists and so on. But I didn't stop there. Also was publishing. And it's interesting. You might know Alan Weiss, and Alan at the time said to me, gee, you just wrote this book. Why don't you send like a newsletter out to people each month? And this was before people were doing a lot of newsletters. I thought, Alan, that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. I mean, why would anyone want to read a newsletter from me? And he said, Andrew, I don't care what you write in your newsletter. Just republish chapters of the book. The whole idea is to get people excited in your work and get in front of them and to project thought leadership. And I thought, okay, I like that idea. Anyway, I'm going to give Alan credit for that. And I sent it to 100 people, the first issue in about 2002. And all of a sudden it was growing and growing. And, I have a pretty big, I'm not like some of these sales gurus who have, 100,000 salespeople who subscribe, but I've got a pretty big executive base that subscribe. And I began writing articles. So that was and then I said, I'm not going to write one book. I won't be like Alan Weiss and write 63 books or whatever it is, but every couple of years, I want to write a book. So that was my strategy. But I also use a relational and referral strategy. That's critical to me. And I think that you have to remember, even if you do good work for clients, they don't necessarily actively promote you.
So what are you doing there? Because I've always seen that there's proactive referrals, as I call them, which is what most people do. It's I should say reactive, where you receive a referral if you're lucky, you do good work and you appreciate it, hopefully. But that's what most people kind of live in, the reactive. There's the whole other side of that, which is being proactive. It's having a system or maybe multiple systems where you're actively looking for referrals or asking those that you're working with. What have you found works best to generate referrals?
So for referrals, first, you have to create an enthusiastic client. And by the way, just to say a word about that, because it's critical, because you're not going to get those referrals reactive or proactive if they're not really excited about you. And I think the way you get people excited about your work is, of course, you deliver really good work. But secondly, you build a relationship with them through which their own career and their success has been enhanced. So it's personal. It's not just you help them cut costs, which is great. but they feel a personal connection to you and that their success has been linked to a warm, trusted relationship with you.
Is that through asking questions?
Now, well, you can start building that through asking more personal questions of an individual, what I call dreams questions, questions about aspirations, goals, legacy, and dreams, and so on. But I think it comes from getting to know them as a person. You don't have to be best friends with them. And one of the best ways to do that is get them out of the office. You talk about different things. It comes from sometimes the questions you ask, and it also comes from you sharing about your life. When I was younger, I was a lot more reserved. I had that sort of maybe professional veneer. And as I've worked more and more in business and worked more and more with executives over the years, I've come to realize that it's good to be professional, but people actually like you as a person. I mean, hopefully they do. And there's a lot of research that shows this is true. People feel a much bigger connection to you when they feel that there has been disclosure, that you have even been vulnerable. I remember once one of my best clients was the chairman of one of the biggest law firms in the country. And this is years ago, and one of our teenage kids was really having some very significant difficulties. Teenagers can have, but it was pretty serious. And I remember when I shared with him, I was teaching a workshop, and halfway through the workshop, I pulled him aside and said, I just want you to know what's going on. And if I seem at all distracted, it's because this is a pretty tough issue my wife and I are dealing with right now, making a decision. And he was so empathetic and sympathetic and supportive. And I remember about 6 months later, he said to me, Andrew, how's your daughter doing? And I said, oh, you don't want to hear about it. And he said, I do want to hear about it because I consider you a friend. That relationship, but if I hadn't been willing to disclose, and now I'm not telling your listeners to go off and start sharing all the details of their personal lives with their clients, but I'm just saying that it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to say, yeah, I went through that once myself. So here's the thing. People only really root for you when they feel a personal connection. So I think that's really important. Now, how do you get the referrals? I think that what you do is you make sure that you're building, if you can't do this with every client. Okay. Some are more aloof, but with some of your clients, you do try to get to know them as people. You get them out of the office. You ask them lots of questions. You take an interest in them personally, and you make sure that you are helping them with their personal agenda, not just their business agenda. Their personal agenda could include networking, meeting the right people, getting on a board of directors. It could include, hey, they just moved to town and you can introduce them to a doctor or a lawyer or a school, something. Yeah, that's it. And then lastly, I think on referrals, when I've done it, I'm very specific. I say to a client, I know that you're on this so-and-so professional association board. Wendy Smith on the board is someone whose company I think is really in my sweet spot. The kind of issues they're grappling with are very much the ones that I deal with. And I'm wondering if you could introduce me to Wendy. So I'm very specific and I give a reason why, as opposed to, hey, is there anyone else, any other companies you could introduce me to? I'll give you one other share. These are all my secrets here. I'll show you one other technique that actually I learned from years ago from a senior partner at one of the big consulting firms. And he told me he had massive referrals. In fact, he said every client I acquire spins off 5 new clients. So I was real curious about and he told me that among other things, one of his techniques was at the beginning of the relationship, he would actually say to his client, this is not after the first meeting. This is after they were well underway with a successful project, maybe a couple months into it. He would say, Michael, all of our business comes through personal referrals. And a year from now, I hope that we will have done such an outstanding job for you and your organization that you'll feel comfortable giving us a referral. And so I'm just mentioning it now because probably a year from now, I'm going to sit down and ask you. And he said it worked incredibly well. Literally 9 or 12 months later, he would sit down with him and say, I know you're on such and such a board. This company worked at very high levels. You're on such and such board. We would love to meet Raymond Smith or whoever on that board. And he said it worked like a charm because it's almost like he was throwing the gauntlet down and saying, I'm putting my reputation on the line that you're going to be so happy with us in a year's time. You're going to give us a referral to a new client. Now, I tend to be a little more laid back about that, but it worked incredibly well for him and his firm. And this is a very prestigious firm. So I think you also, Michael, have to do this in a way that fits your personality.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a moment here. Your business, from an outside appearance, looks like the brand is all about Andrew Sobel. I don't see a team of consultants and complexity. And I'm wondering, what has been your approach? Like, just take us kind of behind the scenes for a moment, Andrew, because you've been able to create very significant business to make a terrific impact on those that you work with directly, but even those who have just consumed the content that you put out in all the many forms. How do you think about scaling and growth and creating a highly profitable, successful business? How have you actually done that from a structural perspective of there's only one of you?
Sure. So it's a great question, and there are different models and different ways to achieve a seven-figure practice. And I just under 15 years in big consulting in leadership positions, and I decided that I didn't want to do any more performance reviews. Now, I was also it depends on your personal circumstances. We had made a decision at the time. We were living in Europe. We moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is up in the mountains. It's not in the desert. Everyone thinks it's the desert. It's up in the north of Santa Fe in the high desert. And we built a house out there. And, it wasn't that practical for me to try to build a firm being based in Santa Fe. In fact, it wasn't very practical for me to build a consulting practice being based in Santa Fe, but I did. So I decided to follow more of the solo practitioner model. Although, if you want me to, I can explain that, in fact, I'm a lot more than a solo practitioner. So there's much more than what you see behind
Yeah, like how many people are involved in your company today?
But, the traditional way of defining involvement doesn't necessarily apply in the digital age. So I'll just give you an example. Yeah. First of all, I have a couple of contractors who work with me who will help deliver programs. I have a vibrant e-learning business, an online business, which, obviously is not labor intensive. Creating it is and marketing it is, but that creates great scale and reach. One of my programs, I've had literally thousands and thousands of clients, corporate clients. These aren't individuals, they're mostly corporate.
Is this you going in and selling, for example, X number of seats or licenses to an organization, or is it one sale at a time?
So first of all, with a corporation, online learning is a solution sale. It really is. Often, they're getting Andrew Sobel in different ways with that course. I might be doing webcasts. I might do a workshop for them. I might do some coaching. So it's usually not completely standalone. E-learning, typically in a corporate setting, they want some of you as well. So I also have licensed my training programs to about half a dozen training firms outside the United States. That's been a really interesting effort. I have a partner in Salt Lake who does that with me, David Covey, who's the son of Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits guru. There are different pieces here. And then, of course, operationally, they're not employees. I have a graphic artist. I have an audio engineer. I have an e-learning consultant who's a learning specialist. I have a social media marketing firm that does work with me from time to time. I've got a publicist. I've got all of these resources around me. Some of them are more full-time than others, but they're as I need them. And so there actually are a lot of pieces to it. The brand is about me. Now, I have friends who have very successfully built small firms that have, let's just say in revenue terms, they're between, $1 million and $5 million. And so they've got 3 or 4 people, or maybe they got 10 people or 12 people. That's a journey unto itself. I think you have to wake up in the morning, and I used to do this in big consulting. You had to wake up in the morning thinking, I do have mouths to feed. I have staff. I've got to get out there and sell. And I'm not saying this is better than that model. Is this different? I wanted to be able to look clients in the eye and really feel if this business is right for both of us, fantastic. If it's not right for you or it's not right for me, that's great too. Maybe a year from now we'll do business and you walk away. And it's been much easier for me to sort of be that trusted advisor to top executives, I feel, because I never had the kind of pressure, the incentive or whatever that I had to feed an organization and I had to sell. By the way, part of that strategy, though, if you're like me, you do have to build a brand. You've got to publish and get yourself in a position where you can charge very high fees. You need to be, so for speeches, for workshops, for coaching, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm in the top 1% in terms of the fees I charge. Clients love it because they get value. but you've got to be up there. It's hard to, if you want to do what I do, you don't want to be in like the bottom quartile of fees, because you're just not going to make any money, because in a small firm, you make money partly through the leverage.
Your focus is on value, not on volume.
Yeah, my focus is on value and also digital scale through a royalty stream and through a digital learning stream.
Yeah, got it. So much more that people should be learning about you and your work. And so I want to make sure that we can point them to that place. But before we get to that, you have a new book. It's called It Starts with Clients. Just take a moment here, Andrew, and tell us, where did this book come from? Why did you write it? And then where can people go to learn more about it?
Sure. So It Starts with Clients. Subtitle is Your 100-Day Plan to Build Lifelong Relationships and Revenue. Basically, have taken pretty much everything I have learned through my research, my practice over the last 25 years, and especially a lot of new things that I developed in the last decade. And I packaged them in this book for anyone who is client-facing, anyone who's trying to build a practice with clients. And basically is framed around 14 challenges that every client-facing person, a consultant, a lawyer, a banker, a salesperson faces. 14 challenges. And it starts from basically identifying your ideal clients, getting recognized, having a great first meeting, to more sophisticated topics like how do you reframe issues to define the totality of the problem? How do you access C-suite executives? How do you really work with top people? And so on. So it covers increasingly challenging and sophisticated topics as you get through the book, but it's structured around the idea of 100 days. And so what I'm doing actually is I'm inviting my clients and any readers of the book into what I call this 100-day challenge. And so I created a little growth guide, not so little, it's pretty comprehensive. I created a growth guide for the book with weekly exercises. And when people sign up for it, they get the guide and they get 15 weekly emails with links to the contents and the materials and their assignment for that week. So that's kind of what we're focusing on with a lot of people. My clients are quite excited about it because everybody loves a campaign. Let's take 100 days and really elevate our standing with our client base. Let's really get in front of clients more. Honestly, right now, that's really important because we're in a very uncertain economic times, public health crisis. And I actually think it's a time when you don't want to get in your client's hair if they're doing urgent things, but you do want to really have the pulse of the market at a time like this.
Definitely. So Andrew, where can people go to learn more about the book and kind of your home base and of all your work?
Yeah, a couple resources. As far as the book goes, I have a page set up on it with the growth guide and everything. And it's simply andrewsobel.com client growth, andrewsobel.com/client growth, or go to my website, andrewsobel.com, and you can find it. And then I also have my Learning Academy is a big resource for my clients, which is learning.andrewsobel.com. And I give away a lot of stuff for free. There's about 400 articles on my website. And so if people can go there and download as many articles as they want, I'll be happy to see them.
Fantastic. Well, Andrew, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing some of your best practices and principles and experiences with us. I really do appreciate it.
Michael, you're very welcome. It's been an engaging conversation. You asked very good questions, so you've obviously gone to school on asking powerful questions. Best of luck. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.